He's feeling the pulse because he represents this area, the 10th Congressional District. He is Congressman Scott Perry, who joins us here this morning. Good morning, Congressman. How are you? It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has been, Gary. Good morning to you and Mark. Welcome back, as it were, and welcome to a week, it seems, of nice weather, which I think will probably lift everybody's spirits. I know I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, man, I can't wait, and it looks pretty good for the week, although it's going to get a little colder again next week, but that's okay. I think spring might be here, although in my neighborhood, my house doesn't get the sun in the afternoon. We're the only ones left with snow on the ground in our yard up on the top of it. That's so a little reminder, but, hey, the COVID-19 stimulus package, a lot of people have been talking about this for a while. It passed the House. It went to the Senate. The Senate passed this weekend, but with changes, and now it comes back to you guys this week. What do you like about this bill? What don't you like about this bill so far? Is it really a good bill to help people out during this time? And how much longer do we need to keep helping people out? I guess those are a lot of the questions that come up this morning. I wanted to let you kind of take a look at that from your eyes as a congressman.
Yeah, I think those are good questions, and we're going to take a look at what the Senate changed. We had it in the House and sent it to the Senate, and they made some changes, so now it's coming back to us. I think they changed some of the thresholds for people receiving stimulus, if you will call them that, stimulus check. So I think $1,400 for an individual making $75,000 or less, and or double that for couples. And then, of course, money for vaccines, which I think that the healthcare aspect of it is really important. I will tell you, Gary, one of my concerns among many, of course, just look, the number is monumental. And I don't think it's a good thing for us to be comfortable with or make normal the fact that we're spending $1.9 trillion on a single package when we look at what the country's earned, so to speak, over the course of a year. That's a huge amount of money, and of course our debt always concerns us. But one of the other things from a practical standpoint is, as I understand it, and again we'll look at the details, is that much of this money doesn't really get out until a year from now. So if we talk about money for reopening schools, for instance, whether it's vaccinations or stuff for heating and cooling systems or what have you, we're a year away from that money making it to the schools. Well, my goodness, we want our schools open. Many of us want them open as much as possible right now, and to get back to some sense of where kids are in the classroom in a more normal setting, and schools are struggling with that. So, and the fact notwithstanding, Gary, that there's still $1 trillion unspent of the last COVID relief package that we sent out there, and then I look at states like Florida or Georgia or North Dakota or something like that, where they do things very differently. I understand they have different population centers and things aren't exactly the same, but they have a situation where their businesses and some of their citizens aren't anywhere close to the same amount of need, and it's based on policy decisions. And so we say, well, we need this $1.9 trillion to deal with the pandemic and the effects of it. I'm not certain that that's reality. I'm not certain that that's true, I guess, is my answer, because other states have proven that it's not true. And so at what point do you punish the taxpayers of one state for the decisions of another?
Right.
And so I think all that has to feed into the discussion about what's right, what's the right amount, what's the timing on the thing, and those type of things.
I think one of the concerns that people have, too, Congressman, is that I was reading, how much of this actually goes to defeating the virus by supporting, public health priorities like, vaccine distribution, for example. 9% of this whole bill, from what I saw, actually goes to defeating the virus by supporting those kinds of policies. And that's if you're a citizen and you're looking at how your tax money is being spent, 9% out of the 100% is being spent for this. That's a concern. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, that when we sent it out of the House, it was the same thing that you just. That was what was said at the time. That's what it appeared. About 91% of the bill was COVID unrelated, yet it was called a COVID relief package, and it seems like that's a misnomer. It should be called something else. So other look, everybody wants to get their bill, their amendment, their policy, their priority on a package that's moving in Congress, and that's what seems to be happening here. It seems like we're using the pandemic to pay for other priorities because it won't be it'll be more palatable if citizens think, well, this has to do with this illness that has plagued our country and the world now for over a year, and so that's a reasonable thing. But when they find out that many of the expenditures had absolutely nothing to do with COVID relief, I don't know that they're going to be very happy about it. And, of course, I got to figure that out now, and the other members have to figure that out now and vote accordingly, and then go talk to our constituents at the grocery store and the gas station and where have you about what happened there.
One of the things that was knocked out in the Senate bill was the minimum wage, which they were pushing for $15. That got, Joe Manchin kind of made sure that didn't happen and held that up. Also, I guess the amount of money for welfare payments, you alluded to that right in the very beginning. Talk a little bit about those two parts that are not coming back to you in the bill as discussed, and whether or not that's going to be palpable to, Democrats who are maybe more progressive right now in the House. About 40 seconds left in this segment.
Okay, so the minimum wage, they're doing this whole bill under a process called reconciliation. The same thing that Obamacare was used to pass Obamacare does not need the two-thirds requirement or 60 votes in the Senate to pass, only needs 51, but it has limitations. That knocked the minimum wage out. Joe Manchin was willing to go 11. The president wanted 15. The parliamentarian advised that neither one was acceptable. So that's what happened there. I suspect you'll see that come back. Regarding the payments, there's two different things, Gary. To me, payments to citizens that are here legally paying their taxes, that's one discussion. But this bill, as I understand it, coming back from the Senate, is going to pay for people that are here illegally as well, under the same considerations, and then also some for prisoners in prison. And I'm not sure. Look, like I said, I want to have an open mind about everything, but I don't know that many American citizens that are working hard every day, getting up in the morning and being away from their family to pay for the bills and the mortgage and the all that stuff are going to be thrilled to hear that. So I'm waiting to see exactly what that language looks like.
WSBA with Congressman Scott Perry from the 10th Congressional. I got to come back to something you mentioned, Scott, in the first segment. $1 trillion still out there that has not yet been spent from the first round of stimulus. And one has to ask as a taxpayer, isn't there some mechanism here in this bill to provide some accountability for that money and where it's being spent or not being spent at this point? I'm just sitting here thinking $1 trillion lying out there around our states, and we don't have any accounting on how it's being spent. It's just still sitting there right now. What your thoughts on that?
Well, that's part of the point. I mean, is this really sincerely going towards the effort to get our country healthy and back in business again, or is this an opportunity being used again? 91% as it left the House had nothing to do with the virus and dealing with that. Is this really just an opportunity to get a wish list of things from a political standpoint or a policy standpoint that different constituencies had long sought? And I think that there's going to be a strong case to make that that's much of what this legislation is about, sadly. And sooner or later, somebody's got to pay this bill. And I know that it seems like we never have to pay the bill. Right? We're headed very quickly towards $30 trillion in debt. But especially when we talk about different existential threats, I hear about that terminology used for a whole host of things. China is right on the horizon, and they would like to take the United States out, and I think we're imperiling ourselves with our adversaries around the globe by continuing to rack up this debt. And at some point they're going to say we either want to call our loans or we no longer want to support the United States dollar as the reserve currency. Those are devastating consequences, and I know that they haven't happened in our lifetimes, but I think we're flirting with disaster over and over again with that.
I was looking at a couple other parts of this bill. We're talking about the stimulus bill that's being sent out for COVID, allegedly. Congressional Democrats want to send an additional $350 billion to states, some of which are running enormous budget surpluses. The bill also sends stimulus checks to individuals who never experienced job loss or financial impact during the pandemic. You also talked about the urgency with which this is being spent. $130 billion in funding for our schools. Only $6 billion would be spent this year. The other $124 billion would be spent over the next 7 years. Getting children safely back in school needs to happen now, not 7 years from now, right?
Well, that's my point. So something that stretches out over 7 years, boy, it is hard to tell what the state of affairs is going to be at that point. It's hard, we have a hard time, I think, predicting tomorrow, right? But
right.
And so that's why you wonder about the sincerity of this. And of course, the things like the multi-employer pension plans and the state pension plans, some are underwater dramatically. I would characterize Pennsylvania, Illinois, New York, California, New Jersey in those conditions. But other states have managed it well. Some of those states are going to get money that they don't need. Many of those states are going to pay for bills that they had no part in incurring. I get angry when I pay for things that I wasn't a party to, and I have to pay the bill on them. I think a lot of taxpayers do. That's what this is in many cases.
It would be like if you saved up money for your kid's education and your next door neighbor didn't, and then they come over and say, hey, by the way, you got to pay for my kid's education too. And you go, well, wait a second, I did all the right things here, and now you're telling me I got to come over and help with that too. That's kind of what this is, isn't it?
That's exactly what this is, Gary. That's not kind of what it is. It's exactly what it is. These are poor policy decision makers by leaders that may be currently in office or long gone, but there have to be consequences to bad policy decisions, and this wipes them out for the sake or on the as a burden to those who did the right thing and made choices that were difficult and maybe didn't give their constituency certain things that their constituency would have liked at the time, but said, no, we're going to be responsible. We're going to create a rainy day fund. We're going to manage our pension so that we're paying for it as we go, and we're not going to incur this huge debt. The states that didn't do those things are now going to get a windfall, and the states that did the right thing are going to end up paying for it. And so you say to yourself, well, what's the incentive to do the right thing? And I think,
right.
Look, we say there's a moral hazard. We call that a moral hazard, but I think that's very dangerous too, because it incentivizes individuals and policymakers and states to continue to do the wrong thing if there's never any consequence for
the other part. The other part of that is too, are you a sucker if you do the right thing? I mean, that's really what a lot of people are starting to, wait a second, we're doing the right thing. Am I a sucker? Am I an easy mark now because of that? One other thing too, and I wanted to get to this with you, Scott, before we leave, is the idea that in this bill, you see a lot of money going for urban areas, and some would say for areas where there's a high concentration of Democrats, and other people are saying not as much going for rural areas. Are you seeing that at all in the bills and the consideration of those bills so far here with regard to COVID? It's about 45 seconds left.
Yeah, much of this, I would say, is a payoff to different political constituencies, sadly, and so the urban centers are getting a lot of the funding, but it's not exclusive. But I would tell you, I do have other problems even with the more rural components, and as I understand it, we'll see if it's in there, but they had what we call ag reparations. Okay. And, 2 years ago, reparations was not very popular, but agricultural reparations. So if you are not a white man receiving agricultural loans under the bill that the Senate was concocting a week ago, you got 120% of your loan value paid back to you. Not 20% or not 100%, 120%, but only for certain race categories. Wow. And so that's where the rural paybacks come from as well.
So you'll be looking to see if that's in there as well. And again, in a time we're trying to get some equalness out here to everybody who's been involved that knows no skin color in terms of losses and so forth. We want to try to make sure we see a lot of justness in what happens. Congressman, really appreciate you taking the time to dissect this thing with us this morning. I know we didn't get through all of it, but we got through a lot of the big parts of it, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you making provisions for us this week instead of last week. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gary, and it's great to have you back. We count on you, so it's great to hear your voice in troubled times, all right?
Thank you, Scott.
Appreciate you. And thanks for the opportunity. God bless
Have a
you
great
and
week.
all the folks that are listening. You
Thanks
too.
so much.